The soft hum of the U.S. Intrepid's engines filled the bridge as Captain Olivia Washington stood with her hands clasped behind her back, gazing at the vast starfield through the main viewport. Her dark brown eyes reflected the distant stars, and her neatly pressed uniform bore the 4 golden stripes that marked her rank. At 42, she had earned every commendation and promotion through sheer determination and excellence. "Captain, all systems are ready for departure," First Officer Kevin Martinez announced from his station. His voice carried a note of respect that Washington had come to appreciate over the past few weeks. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez." She turned to face her bridge crew, each of them representing the best that Earth had to offer. "Status report." Linda Patterson, the ship's science officer, looked up from her console. Her red hair was pulled back in a neat bun as she reported. "All scientific equipment is calibrated and ready, Captain. We're prepared for deep space exploration." Washington nodded, remembering the long journey that had brought her here. 25 years ago, she had been a young cadet at the Space Force Academy, dreaming of the stars. Now, in 2157, she stood as the first black female captain in the United Space Force's history. The Intrepid was no ordinary vessel. At 1,500 feet long, she was a marvel of human engineering, designed for both exploration and diplomatic missions. Her sleek hull housed laboratories, living quarters for 500 crew members, and the most advanced propulsion system ever developed. "Engineering reports ready, Captain." Marcus Thompson's voice came through the comm system. "The new warp core is purring like a kitten." Washington allowed herself a small smile. "Very good, Chief. Bridge to all hands, prepare for departure." As she settled into her command chair, she couldn't help but recall the ceremony just 3 days ago. The space dock above Earth had been filled with dignitaries and press, all eager to witness this historic moment. Some faces had shown pride and support, others barely hidden skepticism. She had heard the whispers, seen the doubtful glances, but none of that mattered now. "Helm, take us out," she ordered. 1/4 impulse power." The massive ship glided smoothly away from the space dock. Through the viewport, Earth grew smaller, a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. Washington felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders, comfortable and familiar. "Course plotted for the Centauri colonies, Captain," reported Maya Bennett from the helm. "Estimated travel time at maximum warp, 6 days, 4 hours." "Very well." Washington tapped her chair's console, opening a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain speaking. We are about to embark on our first mission. Each of you was chosen for this crew because you are the best at what you do. Together, we will explore new worlds, protect Earth's interests, and show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." Washington out. As the ship cleared the solar system's outer markers, Lieutenant Commander Paul Richards approached her chair with a data pad. His expression was professional, but Washington had noticed his slight hesitation whenever he addressed her directly. "Captain, I have the final crew roster and department assignments for your approval," he said, holding out the pad. She took it, scanning the information quickly. "Thank you, Commander. I'll review these in my ready room. Mr. Martinez, you have the bridge." In her ready room, Washington paused at the window, watching the stars streak by as the ship accelerated to warp speed. On her desk sat a small holographic photo of her family, her husband David, their daughter Grace, and her son Marcus. They had supported her through every step of her career, through the long assignments and the difficult choices. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter." Linda Patterson stepped in, holding another data pad. "Captain, I've been analyzing the long-range sensor data from the Centauri region. There are some unusual energy readings I think you should see." Washington gestured to a chair. "Show me." As Patterson explained the readings, Washington felt a familiar excitement build in her chest. This was why she had joined the Space Force, the thrill of discovery, the chance to face the unknown. The rest of the shift passed smoothly, with the crew settling into their routines. Washington made a point of touring the ship, visiting each department. She stopped in engineering, where Chief Thompson showed her the improvements he'd made to the warp core efficiency. "It's not standard procedure," he admitted, "but I've increased power output by 12%. "Good work, Chief," she said, making a mental note of his initiative. In the medical bay, Dr. Sarah Roberts was organizing her staff for their first deep space deployment. "Captain," she greeted warmly, "I hope we won't be seeing too much of each other professionally." "That makes two of us, Doctor," Washington replied with a smile. By the end of her shift, Washington had visited every major section of the ship. As she prepared for sleep in her quarters, she reviewed the day's events. The crew was professional, the ship was running perfectly, and the first mission was underway. Yet something nagged at the back of her mind. The energy readings Patterson had shown her were unlike anything previously recorded in that sector. What would they find when they reached the Centauri colonies? Her communication panel beeped. "Bridge to Captain Washington." "Go ahead." "Ma'am, we're receiving a priority message from Space Force Command. They're requesting we increase speed to maximum warp. There's been an incident at one of the colonies." Washington was already moving, pulling on her uniform jacket. "I'm on my way. Sound yellow alert, and have the senior staff meet me in the briefing room." As she strode through the corridors, crew members stepped aside respectfully. This was what she had trained for. Whatever crisis awaited them at the colonies, she would face it head-on. The briefing room was full when she arrived. Her senior staff sat around the table, faces serious as they discussed the incoming data. "Report," she ordered, taking her seat at the head of the table. Martinez stood, activating the room's holographic display. 3 hours ago, Colony Beta 7 reported unusual phenomena in their sector. Ships are experiencing navigation problems, and there are reports of unexplained power fluctuations. Patterson added, "The energy readings match what we detected earlier, Captain, but they're much stronger now." Washington studied the data, her mind working through scenarios and possibilities. "Recommendations?" Each officer offered their perspective, and she listened carefully. This was why she had chosen this crew, not just for their skills, but for their ability to think independently and work together. "Very well," she said finally. "Helm, increase to maximum warp. Engineering, I want full power available when we arrive. Science team, continue analyzing that data. We need to know what we're dealing with before we get there." As the meeting ended and her officers returned to their posts, Washington remained for a moment, looking at the holographic display of their destination. Whatever waited for them at Beta 7, she would face it with the same determination that had brought her to this position. Her communication badge chirped again. "Bridge to Captain. We're receiving new readings from the colony. The situation is deteriorating." "Understood." "Set condition yellow throughout the ship. I'm on my way." Washington stepped onto the bridge, her presence immediately drawing the attention of the crew. She took her place in the command chair, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Time to Beta 7, she asked. 4 hours at current speed, Captain," Bennett reported from the helm. Washington nodded, her expression determined. "Send word to the colony. Tell them the Intrepid is coming." As the ship raced through space, Captain Olivia Washington prepared herself and her crew for their first real test. She had overcome every obstacle in her path to reach this position, and she would not fail now. The lives of the colonists depended on her, and she would show everyone why she had been chosen to command the U.S. Intrepid. The U.S. Intrepid dropped out of warp near Beta 7 colony, its sensors immediately picking up the strange energy readings that had brought them here. Captain Washington stood from her command chair, studying the main view screen with intense focus. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension on the bridge. Linda Patterson's fingers flew over her science console. "Captain, the energy signature is like nothing in our database. It's centered around what appears to be an artificial structure approximately 2 kilometers in length." The view screen zoomed in on the object. It was dark against the stars, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. As they watched, waves of energy rippled across its surface. "Life signs?" Washington asked, stepping closer to the screen. "None detected, but our sensors are having trouble penetrating the outer layer," Patterson replied. "The material is unlike anything we've encountered before." First Officer Martinez joined Washington at the view screen. "The colony reports 17 ships have lost power in the last 6 hours when they got too close to that thing. 5 of them are still stranded out there." Washington's mind raced through their options. They needed to help those ships, but they couldn't risk the Intrepid suffering the same fate. "Keep us at a safe distance." Mr. Martinez, prepare rescue teams. We'll use our shuttles to reach the stranded vessels. Captain, Maya Bennett called from the helm. I'm detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations. They seem to be emanating from the object in regular pulses. The ship suddenly shuddered, causing several crew members to grab their consoles for support. Washington steadied herself against her chair. What was that? The object is generating some kind of gravitational wave, Patterson reported, her voice tense. It's affecting everything within a radius of 50,000 kilometers, including the colony. Chief Engineer Thompson's voice came over the comm. Engineering to bridge. Captain, these gravity waves are putting stress on our structural integrity field. We can handle it for now, but I don't like what it's doing to our power grid. Understood, Chief. Do what you can to reinforce our shields. Washington turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the colony. The worried face of Colony Administrator John Peters appeared on screen. Captain Washington, thank God you're here. We've had to evacuate 3 habitat modules already. The structural stress is becoming critical. We're analyzing the situation now, Administrator. Have your people ready to evacuate if necessary. We'll do everything we can to help. She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. Options. Patterson looked up from her readings. Captain, I think I found something. The object's energy signature changes when we direct certain types of scanning beams at it. It's almost like it's responding. Washington finished the thought. Exactly. And look at this. Patterson transferred her display to the main screen, showing a complex pattern of energy waves. These aren't random fluctuations. There's a pattern here. Lieutenant Commander Paul Richards, who had been quietly monitoring his security station, spoke up. Captain, this could be a weapon. Some kind of automated defense system left behind by an unknown species. Washington shook her head. If it were a weapon, why place it so close to a relatively new human colony? We've only been in this sector for 15 years. She studied the pattern on the screen. This looks more like a beacon, or maybe a probe. Another gravity wave hit the ship, stronger this time. Warning lights flashed across several consoles. Shields holding at 80%, Richards reported. But that last wave was 20% stronger than the previous one. Washington made her decision. Patterson, focus our sensors on that pattern you discovered. Bennett, move us into a parallel course with the object, but maintain safe distance. Martinez, get those rescue teams launched. Let's get our people out of harm's way first. The next hour was a flurry of activity as shuttle crews worked to rescue the stranded ships. Washington coordinated the efforts from the bridge, watching as each vessel was towed to safety. But with each passing minute, the gravity waves grew stronger. Captain, Patterson called out suddenly, I think I found something. The object's surface patterns. They're not just decoration. They're similar to mathematical sequences we use in our own computer systems. Washington moved to the science station, studying the data. Can we communicate with it? Maybe, if we modify our signal to match its pattern. Patterson worked quickly at her console. There. I'm sending a basic mathematical sequence using the same energy frequency as the object. The bridge crew held their breath as they waited. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the object's pulsing changed. The gravity wave stopped. It's responding. Patterson exclaimed. The pattern it's sending back, it's a variation of what we sent. It's definitely artificial intelligence, Captain. Before Washington could respond, the object began to move. Its surface lit up with brilliant blue light, and it slowly rotated until one end pointed directly at the Intrepid. Shields to maximum, Washington ordered. But hold position. If it wanted to attack us, it could have done so already. A beam of light shot from the object, but instead of striking the ship, it projected a 3-dimensional hologram in the space between them. The image showed a star system none of them recognized, with planets arranged in an unusual configuration. It's trying to show us something, Washington said softly. Patterson, record everything. Martinez, see if you can match this star system with our charts. The hologram changed, showing what appeared to be a massive space station orbiting one of the planets. Then it showed ships, dozens of them, all of similar design to the object they'd encountered. A map, Washington realized. It's showing us where it came from. The hologram flickered and disappeared. The object's light dimmed slightly, but it remained active, waiting. "Captain," Martinez said, "I've cross-referenced the star system with our database. Nothing matches exactly, but based on the stellar configuration shown, it could be in the direction of the Carina Nebula." Washington took a deep breath, knowing she faced a crucial decision. This could be humanity's first contact with evidence of an advanced alien civilization. But she also had to consider the safety of her crew and the colonists. "Patterson, can you communicate with it again? Ask it to move away from the colony?" The science officer worked at her console, translating their request into the mathematical language they discovered. The object responded immediately, moving smoothly away from Beta 7 until it was at a safe distance. Colonial Administrator Peters is reporting that the structural stress on their habitats is decreasing. Communications reported. They're beginning damage assessment now. Washington nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Good. Now let's see what our new friend wants to tell us." She turned to Patterson. "Keep communicating with it. Let's learn everything we can." As the shift continued, the bridge crew worked tirelessly to understand their discovery. The object, which they now believed to be an automated probe of some kind, continued to share information through its holographic displays, showing them glimpses of technology far beyond their own. "Captain," Martinez said quietly, coming to stand beside her chair, "this could be the most important discovery in human history." Washington smiled slightly. "And to think some people doubted whether I could handle command of an exploration vessel." She stood, straightening her uniform. "Send a priority message to Space Force Command. Tell them we've made first contact with evidence of an advanced alien civilization and request additional scientific support." As she watched her crew work, Captain Olivia Washington felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had faced a potential crisis and turned it into a moment of discovery. Whatever this probe had to teach them, she knew her crew would face it with courage and curiosity. The object continued to hover in space, its gentle blue light pulsing steadily, waiting to share more of its secrets with its new human friends. 8 hours into their communication with the alien probe, everything went wrong. Captain Washington had just returned from a brief rest period when the first alarm sounded. "Captain." Patterson's voice was sharp with urgency. "The probe's energy signature is changing dramatically. Power levels are spiking." Before Washington could respond, the probe's gentle blue glow turned to a harsh red. Waves of energy burst from its surface, much stronger than before. "Report," Washington commanded, gripping her chair as the ship rocked violently. Chief Thompson's voice crackled over the comm. "Engineering to bridge. These gravity waves are 10 times stronger than before. The structural integrity field can't take much more of this." Around them, the space itself seemed to bend and twist. Through the view screen, they watched in horror as the nearby ships began to drift, caught in powerful gravitational eddies. "Beta 7 colony is reporting massive structural damage," Martinez announced, his face grim. "Their main habitat ring is starting to buckle." Washington's mind raced. 3,000 colonists lived on Beta 7 if the habitat ring failed. She pressed her comm badge. "Bridge to all hands. This is not a drill. Red alert. All emergency teams to stations." The ship's lighting shifted to red, and warning klaxons blared throughout the corridors. Lieutenant Commander Richards spoke up from his security station, his voice tight with barely concealed accusation. "Captain, we should have been more cautious. This thing is clearly a threat." Washington ignored the comment, focusing instead on solutions. "Patterson, what happened? Why did it suddenly turn hostile?" "I don't think it's hostile, Captain," Patterson replied, fingers flying over her console. "The mathematical patterns have changed, but they're still there. It's like it's trying to tell us something urgent." Another gravity wave hit, stronger than before. Sparks flew from a nearby console as systems overloaded. "Shields at 40%. Richards called out. "We can't take much more of this." Washington stood, her voice carrying over the chaos. "Patterson, focus on those patterns. Bennett, try to find a stable position in this gravity field. Thompson, divert all available power to structural integrity. Martinez, coordinate with Beta 7, begin emergency evacuation procedures." "Captain," a junior officer spoke up nervously, Some of the crew are saying we should destroy the probe before it tears everything apart. Washington turned to face the young officer. And risk setting off something even worse? No, we solved this problem with brains, not weapons. She moved to Patterson's station. Show me those patterns again. As they studied the data, another violent tremor shook the ship. From the view screen, they could see pieces of the colony's outer ring beginning to tear away. Colony reports they've lost artificial gravity in sectors 4 through 7, Martinez reported. They're struggling to evacuate. Washington felt the weight of command pressing down on her. 2 more crew members exchanged worried glances, and she could sense their growing doubt in her leadership. "Captain," Richards said, his tone challenging, "we need to make a decision now. The colony won't survive another hour of this." Washington straightened her back, her voice firm. "I have made my decision, Lieutenant Commander. We're going to solve this puzzle." She turned to Patterson. "Those patterns, they changed right after we sent that last mathematical sequence, correct?" "Yes, Captain. It's like..." Patterson's eyes widened. "Of course, the sequence we sent. It must have triggered some kind of automated response protocol." Washington leaned closer to the screen. "Look at these symbols. They're similar to what we saw in the star map, but they're moving faster, more urgently." "A warning," Patterson breathed. "Captain, I think it's trying to warn us about something." Another violent shake rocked the ship. "Hull stress reaching critical levels," Thompson reported from engineering. "We've got stress fractures forming on decks 6 through 10. Colony reports total failure of their artificial gravity system," Martinez added. "They've got injured people floating in corridors. Medical teams can't reach them." Washington made a quick decision. "Bennett, move us closer to the probe." "Captain." Several voices spoke at once, filled with disbelief. "You heard me. If it's trying to warn us, we need to understand what about. Take us in, quarter impulse." As they moved closer, the gravitational effects intensified. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the ship's hull groaned under the strain. "Look," Patterson pointed to her readings. "The pattern's changing again. It's..." "Captain, I think I understand. These aren't just gravity waves, they're ripples in space-time itself. The probe is detecting something coming, something big." Washington's eyes narrowed. "Something that could tear this whole system apart." "Yes, and the probe is trying to." Patterson's voice trailed off as her console lit up with new data. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive spatial distortion forming. Distance, 3 light-years and closing fast." Washington didn't hesitate. "Open a channel to Space Force Command, Priority 1. We need every available ship in this sector. Then get me Beta 7. Administrator Peters' face appeared on screen, his image flickering with interference. "Captain, we're losing containment. We need help now." "Listen carefully," Washington said, her voice calm but intense. "Begin immediate evacuation of all personnel. The Intrepid will assist, but you need to move fast. We've got something much worse than gravity waves headed our way." Over the next hour, Washington coordinated the most massive evacuation in colonial history. As shuttles and escape pods streamed from Beta 7, her crew worked tirelessly to understand the probe's warnings. "Spatial distortion now 1 light-year out," Patterson reported. "The probe's energy output is reaching critical levels." Washington stood in the center of her bridge, watching the chaos unfold around her. Some had doubted her ability to command. Some had questioned her decisions. But now, as she faced the greatest crisis of her career, she knew exactly what she had to do. "All hands," she announced shipwide. "This is your captain speaking. What we do in the next hour will determine the fate of this entire sector. I need everyone's best work now. Together, we're going to save these people and solve this mystery." The crew responded to her words, moving with renewed purpose. As emergency teams helped evacuate the colony and engineering crews fought to keep the ship intact, Washington turned her attention to the approaching threat. The probe's warnings grew more urgent with each passing minute. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. And Captain Olivia Washington would prove once and for all why she deserved to sit in that command chair. "Spatial distortion now entering the system," Patterson announced. "Impact in 30 minutes. Washington squared her shoulders. "Send word to all ships. Prepare for emergency maneuvers. We're not done yet." The red alert klaxons continued to wail as the Intrepid and her crew prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. Captain Washington stood at the center of her bridge as chows erupted around her. The spatial distortion approached rapidly, while the alien probe pulsed with increasingly frantic patterns of red light. "Evacuation status?" she demanded, keeping her voice steady despite the crisis. Martinez consulted his display. 87% of colonists evacuated. Emergency teams are making final sweeps of the habitats. But Captain, we're running out of time. The ship shuddered again as another gravity wave hit them. Through the view screen, they could see the last groups of escape pods streaming away from Beta 7 colony. "Patterson, talk to me about that probe," Washington ordered. "What's it trying to tell us now?" The science officer's fingers flew across her console. The mathematical patterns have changed again. "There? Captain, I think it's showing us a way to counteract the spatial distortion." Washington moved to Patterson's station, studying the complex streams of data. "Explain." "The probe's gravity waves, they're not random. They're forming a specific pattern, like ripples in a pond. If we could generate similar waves, we could create interference patterns." Washington finished, her mind racing. "Like noise cancellation." Chief Thompson's voice came over the comm. "Captain, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, we need massive amounts of power. More than one ship can generate." Washington smiled slightly. "Then it's a good thing we're not alone out here." She turned to communications. "Get me all ships in range. Now." Within moments, the faces of 6 other starship captains appeared on the main screen. Some looked skeptical, others worried, but all listened as Washington quickly explained her plan. "The probe is showing us how to save this system," she said. "But we'll need to work together. Each ship will need to generate specific gravitational pulses using their warp cores." Captain Alan Morris of the U.S. Endeavour spoke first. "That's incredibly risky. One mistake in the calculations could tear our ships apart." Washington finished. "I know, but if we do nothing, that spatial distortion will destroy everything in this sector." There was a moment of silence as the other captains considered her words. Then Captain Susan Chen of the U.S. Valiant spoke up. "My ship is yours to command, Captain Washington." One by one, the others agreed. Washington nodded gratefully. "Patterson, send them the frequency patterns. Thompson, begin warp core modifications. We got 20 minutes to make this work." The next quarter hour was a blur of activity. Engineering teams across 7 ships worked frantically to modify their warp cores. Patterson coordinated with their science officers, ensuring each ship knew exactly what frequency to generate. "Spatial distortion 10 minutes out," Martinez reported. "It's massive, Captain, the size of a small moon." Washington took her seat in the command chair. "All ships, move into position. Form a hexagon pattern around the probe, Intrepid at the center." The ships moved gracefully into formation, their running lights bright against the darkness of space. The probe's red glow pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat. "Engineering reports ready," Thompson announced. "But Captain, we'll only get one shot at this. If the timing's off by even a fraction of a second, then we won't be off," Washington said firmly. "Patterson, begin final countdown. All ships, prepare to initiate on my mark." The bridge fell silent except for Patterson's voice counting down. Through the view screen, they could see the spatial distortion approaching, a massive tear in the fabric of space itself, distorting the light of distant stars. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "All ships, now," Washington commanded. 7 warp cores powered up simultaneously, each generating precisely calculated gravitational waves. The alien probe's light changed from red to brilliant white as it added its own power to their effort. The combined waves spread outward, creating a complex pattern of intersecting gravitational fields. The ship groaned under the strain as space itself seemed to bend around them. "Structural integrity failing," Thompson warned. "Hull stress at maximum. Hold position," Washington ordered. "Keep those frequencies steady." The spatial distortion hit their combined gravity field. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the distortion began to warp, its edges twisting as the interfering waves affected it. "It's working," Patterson exclaimed. "The distortion is being diverted." Washington gripped her chair as the ship shuddered violently. Status of other ships. All holding position, Martinez reported. But their systems are as strained as ours. The next 5 minutes felt like hours as they maintained their positions, their ships' combined power forcing the spatial distortion to split and flow around their protected zone. The alien probe's white light pulsed in perfect synchronization with their efforts. Finally, Patterson called out, "Distortion is passing. 10,000 kilometers. 20,000. It's clearing the system." A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew. Washington allowed herself a small smile but kept her focus. Damage reports from all ships? Minor to moderate damage on all vessels, Martinez reported. But we're all in one piece. The colony infrastructure is heavily damaged but intact. No casualties reported. Washington stood, straightening her uniform. Signal all ships. Well done. Begin power down sequence on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The gravitational fields disappeared as 7 warp cores powered down simultaneously. The alien probe's light returned to its original soft blue glow. "Captain," Patterson said excitedly, "the probe is transmitting again. More star charts, but also, I think these are specifications. Technical data. It's sharing its technology with us." Washington moved to the science station, studying the incoming data. It wasn't just warning us. It was testing us, seeing if we could understand and use its technology. Lieutenant Commander Richards approached her. "Captain, I was wrong to doubt you. Your solution saved everyone." Washington nodded acceptance of his apology. "We all learned something today about not jumping to conclusions." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "What we achieved here wasn't just about technology. It was about trust, cooperation, and keeping cool heads in a crisis." The next few hours were spent coordinating with the other ships, organizing relief efforts for the colony, and beginning to analyze the wealth of data the probe had shared with them. Washington oversaw it all, making sure every detail was handled properly. As her shift finally ended, she stood at the view screen, watching the probe continue its peaceful orbit. First Officer Martinez joined her. "Quite a day, Captain," he said. "Space Force Command is calling it one of the most significant first contact events in human history." Washington smiled. "And to think some people didn't believe we were ready for deep space exploration, or that someone like me could handle command." Martinez nodded. "I don't think anyone will question that again, not after today." As she headed to her quarters for some much-needed rest, Washington reflected on the events of the day. They had faced an impossible crisis and found a solution through cooperation, intelligence, and determination. Those who had doubted her abilities now looked at her with new respect. But more importantly, humanity had proven itself ready for a new chapter in its journey to the stars. And Captain Olivia Washington would help lead the way. 2 weeks had passed since the crisis with the alien probe, and the U.S. at Intrepid orbited Earth's main space dock. Captain Olivia Washington stood in her dress uniform before the assembled crew in the ship's main hangar bay. The large space was filled to capacity, with Space Force officials, media representatives, and distinguished guests joining the celebration. To say that our first mission exceeded expectations would be an understatement. Washington began, her voice carrying clearly through the hangar. "Each one of you performed above and beyond the call of duty. Together, we not only saved thousands of lives but also made first contact with an advanced alien civilization." The crowd listened intently as she continued. The past 2 weeks had been busy. After securing Beta 7 colony and ensuring all evacuees were safe, they had spent days studying the probe's technical data. The information they received had already led to several breakthrough discoveries in propulsion and energy generation. Admiral Laura Stewart stepped forward, her medals glinting under the hangar lights. "Captain Washington, your actions during the crisis have earned you and your crew the highest commendations Space Force can offer. But more than that, you've shown the galaxy that humanity is ready for greater challenges." Washington accepted the medal with dignity, but her thoughts were on her crew. "The real credit belongs to them, Admiral, especially my senior staff, who never lost faith even when faced with impossible odds." The ceremony continued as individual crew members were recognized for their contributions. Linda Patterson received special recognition for her work in decoding the probe's communications. Chief Thompson was honored for his innovative warp core modifications that made their solution possible. After the formal proceedings, Washington found herself surrounded by reporters and officials. One journalist stepped forward with a question that had been on many minds. Captain, how do you respond to those who initially questioned your appointment as the first black female captain in the Space Force? Washington smiled diplomatically. I let my actions and those of my crew speak for themselves. Leadership isn't about gender or race. It's about making the right decisions under pressure and trusting in your team. Later that evening, in a smaller gathering in the officers' lounge, the senior staff celebrated more privately. The view of Earth through the windows provided a stunning backdrop as they relaxed together for the first time since the crisis. I still can't believe how much we learned from that probe, Patterson said, examining data on her pad. These technological advances could push human development forward by decades. Martinez raised his glass. And it's all thanks to our captain's decision to understand rather than attack. Speaking of decisions, Washington said, I have news for all of you. She waited until she had everyone's attention. Space Force Command has given us a new assignment. We're going back out there, following the star charts the probe provided. The announcement was met with enthusiasm. Even Lieutenant Commander Richards, who had once doubted her, smiled broadly. No one better qualified to lead that mission, Captain. Washington walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The probe showed us something remarkable. Not just advanced technology, but evidence that there's so much more out there waiting to be discovered. And now we have a map to guide us. The next morning, Washington arrived early on the bridge. Engineering teams had worked around the clock to incorporate some of the probe's technological insights into their systems. The Intrepid was now even more advanced than before. Ship status, she asked as her crew took their stations. All systems ready, Captain, Martinez reported. Engineering reports the new modifications are functioning perfectly. Course laid in for the coordinates provided by the probe, Bennett announced from the helm. Washington settled into her command chair, feeling the familiar sense of anticipation before a mission. Send word to Space Force Command. The Intrepid is ready for departure. As the ship prepared to leave dock, Washington recorded her personal log. Captain's log, stardate 215745. We depart today not just as explorers, but as representatives of humanity's potential. The crisis at Beta 7 taught us valuable lessons about cooperation, innovation, and the importance of keeping an open mind. But perhaps most importantly, it showed that when we work together, there are no barriers we cannot overcome. She paused, looking around at her crew, each one focused on their duties, professional and confident. They had faced their trial by fire and emerged stronger. The doubters had been silenced, and the path ahead was clear. Bridge to engineering, she called. How are those new systems looking, Chief? Thompson's voice came back enthusiastic. Better than we could have hoped, Captain. The probe's technology has improved our efficiency by 30%. We're ready to push the boundaries. Washington stood, straightening her uniform. Communications, send our final departure clearance. Helm, take us out. 1/4 impulse until we clear the dock. The massive ship glided smoothly away from Earth. Through the view screen, they watched their home planet grow smaller, a beautiful blue marble against the black of space. Course plotted for the first set of coordinates, Bennett reported. Ready for warp speed on your command. Washington took a moment to appreciate the significance of this moment. They were about to venture further into space than any human ship had gone before, following a map left by an advanced civilization that had judged humanity worthy of contact. Let the record show, she said clearly, that this mission represents not just the achievements of one crew or one captain, but the potential of all humanity when we put aside our differences and work together. She returned to her chair, feeling the familiar comfort of command. Helm, engage at warp factor 6. Let's see what's waiting for us out there. The Intrepid's engines hummed to life, and the stars began to streak past as they accelerated to warp speed. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing their role in this historic mission. As they left the solar system behind, Washington reflected on how far they had come. From the doubts that had greeted her appointment, through the crisis that had tested them all, to this moment of triumph and new beginnings. Captain, Patterson called from her station. Long-range sensors are already picking up some interesting readings from our destination system. Washington smiled. Well then, let's go see what new mysteries await us. After all, that's why we're out here. The U.S. Intrepid continued its journey into the unknown, carrying its crew toward new discoveries and adventures. And at its helm stood Captain Olivia Washington, proof that leadership knows no boundaries, and that the stars themselves were within reach for anyone with the courage to grasp them. The end.